I'm Helene, 32 years old, and I never thought my 8-year marriage to James would end with me orchestrating its final scene. We built what I thought was a perfect life with our 2 beautiful children. Then came the text message that changed everything. I found my soulmate. At first, the pain paralyzed me, but I soon realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting even with the truth. If you're watching this from a place where trust was shattered, too, drop a heart in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life lessons that nobody prepares you for. I met James during my sophomore year of college. I was studying literature, and he was pursuing computer science. We literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I spilled my latte all over his laptop, and instead of getting angry, he laughed and asked for my number so I could make it up to him. That turned into our first date, which led to 3 years of dating before he proposed. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl. We got married in a beautiful garden ceremony with 150 guests. I wore my grandmother's restored vintage dress, and when James saw me walking down the aisle, he cried. Everyone commented on how in love we looked, and we were. Truly, madly, deeply in love. The first years of marriage were blissful. We moved into a cozy 3-bedroom house in a nice suburb, painted every room together, and planted a small garden in the backyard. James would bring me wildflowers every Friday just because. We'd stay up late talking about our dreams, our fears, our future. We were best friends as much as we were lovers. Emma came along 2 years after we got married. She was a surprise, but the best one we could have asked for. With her curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes, she looked just like James. She was always curious, always asking questions, always wanting to explore. When she was 2, Noah joined our family. He was my mini-me with dark hair and hazel eyes. More reserved than his sister, he preferred cuddling up with a book to running around outside. They were perfect complements to each other, just like James and I were. Our mornings had a comfortable routine. James would make breakfast while I got the kids ready. We'd all eat together, talking about what we were looking forward to that day. Then James would kiss each of us goodbye before heading to work. I'd take the kids to school and preschool before heading to my job at the local library. I loved working at the library. It wasn't particularly glamorous or high-paying, but it allowed me to be surrounded by books and still pick up the kids from school. I'd worked there since Emma was born, starting with just 12 hours a week, and gradually increasing to 25 as the kids got older. My boss, Carol, was understanding about my need for flexibility, especially when the kids were sick or had school events. James's career, on the other hand, was skyrocketing. He started at TechFuture, a growing software company, right after graduation. Within 5 years, he was leading his own development team. 2 years ago, he was promoted to Director of Product Development. I was so proud of him. We celebrated each promotion, each accomplishment. His success felt like our success, but success comes with sacrifices. James started staying late at the office more frequently. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then 3 or 4 times. He'd come home tired, eat quickly, and fall asleep almost immediately. Our conversations became briefer, focused on logistics and schedules rather than dreams and feelings. I told myself it was just a busy period. All careers have them. It would pass. The weekends were still ours, though. We'd take the kids to the park or the zoo. We'd have movie nights with homemade popcorn and blanket forts in the living room. James would read bedtime stories, doing all the character voices that made the kids laugh uncontrollably. These moments convinced me that despite the long hours and tiredness, we were still solid. Still us. Looking back now, I realize I was seeing what I wanted to see. The cracks were forming hairline fractures in our foundation, but I was too busy maintaining our family life to notice them widening. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them. It's amazing how blind love can make you, how willing you are to explain away the warning signs when the alternative is too painful to consider. But then again, Isn't that what we all do? We believe in the people we love. We give them the benefit of the doubt. We assume the best intentions. Because that's what you do when you build a life with someone. You choose every day to trust them, until you can't anymore. The first major change I noticed was when James started attending weekend team-building events. In 8 years of marriage, his company had never required weekend work. Suddenly, there was a retreat every month or so. I didn't question it at first. Companies change, priorities shift, and James was in management now. Different responsibilities come with different expectations. Then, his personal habits started changing. James had always been casual about his appearance at home, comfortable in worn t-shirts and the same 2 pairs of jeans. But now he was buying new clothes, experimenting with different hairstyles, and even started using cologne regularly. Something he hadn't done since our dating days. "You smell nice," I commented one evening as he returned from work. "Just trying something different," he replied, hurrying upstairs to shower. That was another new habit. He'd always shower in the mornings, but now he insisted on showering immediately after getting home. Every day. Without fail. His phone became an extension of his hand, and it was always face down when not in use. One day, when I asked to use it to take a picture because mine was charging, he hesitated before handing it over, watching me intently as I used the camera. "Did you change your passcode?" I asked casually when I couldn't unlock it. "Yeah, work security protocols," he explained quickly. "They make us change them every 60 days now." I nodded and handed it back, ignoring the small voice in my head that whispered this wasn't right. That James had never been secretive before. That his company hadn't suddenly implemented draconian security measures that extended to personal devices. But the most painful change was how he interacted with our children. James had always been a hands-on father who never missed a school event or soccer game. Now he was distracted during dinner, looking at his phone more than at Emma and Noah. He missed Emma's ballet recital because of a work emergency, something that had never happened before. When I showed him the video later, he barely watched it, mumbling generic compliments while scrolling through his emails. "Daddy doesn't play with us anymore," Noah said one night as I tucked him in. "He's just busy with work, sweetie," I replied, my heart breaking at the disappointment in my son's eyes. "He still loves you very much." "Then why is he always on his phone?" Emma asked from the doorway. At 6, she was already too perceptive for her own good. I had no answer that wouldn't feel like a lie, so I just kissed them goodnight and promised that this weekend would be different. We'd do something special as a family. But when I suggested it to James, he already had plans. Another team event he couldn't miss. I tried to save our connection in other ways. I planned a surprise date night and arranged for my mother to watch the kids. I made reservations at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I bought a new dress and spent extra time getting ready. But 2 hours before we were supposed to leave, James called. "I'm so sorry, Helene. There's an issue with the new software release. I have to stay and fix it." "Can't someone else handle it?" I asked, fighting to keep the disappointment from my voice. "I'm the only one who knows this part of the code well enough," he explained, sounding genuinely regretful. "Rain check." I agreed, of course. What else could I do? I sent my mother home and ate dinner in my new dress at the kitchen table alone with a bottle of wine and the growing sense that something was very wrong in my marriage. The night I discovered James texting at 2 a.m. was when I could no longer deny my suspicions. I had woken up thirsty and noticed the blue light from his phone illuminating his face on the other side of the bed. He was smiling at whatever he was reading, a soft, intimate smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. When he noticed me stirring, he quickly locked the phone and pretended to be just checking the time. "Work stuff," he mumbled before turning away from me. I lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, my stomach in knots. The next day, I called my friend Amanda for coffee. She'd been my best friend since high school and had seen James and me through every stage of our relationship. "I think something's wrong with James," I confessed after we'd settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. "He's different, distant, secretive." Amanda listened as I detailed all the changes, her expression growing more concerned with each example. "Helene," she said, finally reaching for my hand. "You know what this sounds like, don't you?" I pulled my hand away. "He wouldn't cheat. Not James. He's a good person. A good father." "Good people make mistakes," she said gently. "And I hope I'm wrong. But these are classic signs, and you deserve to know the truth, whatever it is." I went home determined to talk to James to clear the air, and maybe even laugh about my paranoid suspicions. But as I walked into our bedroom and saw his perfectly made side of the bed, the cologne bottle prominently displayed on his dresser, and thought of all the late nights and weekend absences, I knew Amanda was right. I needed the truth, even if it destroyed the life I thought we had. The opportunity to find that truth came 3 days later. James had gone for a shower, leaving his phone on the kitchen counter while I cleaned up after dinner. I heard the water start upstairs and knew I had maybe 15 minutes. My hands shook as I picked up his phone, afraid of what I might find, but more afraid of continuing to live in denial. To my surprise, it wasn't locked. He must have been using it right before setting it down and hadn't realized it would stay unlocked for a couple of minutes. I went straight to his messages, knowing this might be my only chance. Most were innocent. Work colleagues discussing projects, group chats with his college friends about fantasy football, conversations with his parents about their upcoming visit. And then I saw the name Sophie. I tapped on the conversation and immediately wished I hadn't. There were hundreds of messages going back over 3 months. I scrolled quickly, my vision blurring with tears as I read snippets of their exchanges. "Miss your smile already. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. That meeting was torture, not being able to sit next to you." And then the one that felt like a physical blow. "I've never felt this way before, Sophie. I've found my soulmate in you. What we have is beyond anything I ever thought possible." Sophie had responded with heart emojis, and "I feel the same way. We were meant to find each other." I scrolled up further and saw they had exchanged photos too. Nothing explicit, thankfully, but intimate in their own way. James in his car, smiling in a way he no longer smiled at home. Sophie in what looked like a hotel lobby, blowing a kiss at the camera. Sophie at a restaurant, raising a wine glass in toast. I quickly memorized her full name from the contact info and put the phone back exactly where James had left it. Then I went to the downstairs bathroom, locked the door, turned on the faucet, and silently screamed into a towel. Sophie Walker. The name was unfamiliar, but a quick social media search while still in the bathroom revealed she was a new marketing director at Tech Future. She had started about 4 months ago, right around the time James began changing. Her profile was mostly private, but her profile picture showed an attractive woman with long auburn hair and a confident smile. She looked about my age, maybe a few years younger. What shattered me even more was discovering she was married. Her bio mentioned @Mark Walker and included a wedding date from 5 years ago. There were a few public photos of them together, a handsome couple at various events and vacation spots. Mark was tall with dark hair, usually pictured with his arm around Sophie, both of them looking happy. The water upstairs shut off. I quickly cleared my search history, dried my eyes, and returned to the kitchen. When James came downstairs, his hair still damp, I was loading the dishwasher as if nothing had happened, as if my entire world hadn't just imploded. "Kids asleep?" he asked, reaching for an apple from the fruit bowl. "Almost," I replied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "Emma wants you to read her a story." "I'm pretty tired," he said, glancing at his phone. "Big day tomorrow. Can you handle it tonight?" "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "No problem." He didn't notice my red eyes or the slight tremble in my hands. He was already back to looking at his phone, probably texting her, thinking I was too naive to suspect anything. Over the next week, I gathered more information. Sophie Walker had moved from Chicago to join Tech Future. Her husband, Mark, was a structural engineer who had transferred to a local firm to accompany her. They had no children. She had quickly risen to become a key member of the executive team, working closely with various department heads, including James. I found opportunities to check James's phone twice more, taking screenshots and sending them to my own phone as evidence. I discovered they had been meeting at a hotel downtown during his supposed late nights at the office, and had even spent a weekend together when he told me he was at a company retreat in Portland. I read their plans for the future, vague discussions about figuring things out and being together properly someday. My husband of 8 years, the father of my children, was planning a life with another woman while sleeping in our bed and telling our children he loved them. The worst part was I still loved him. Despite the betrayal, despite the lies, part of me still remembered the man who had cried when I walked down the aisle, who had held my hand through 20 hours of labor with Emma, who had built a treehouse for the kids with his own hands. How could that man and this liar be the same person? But they were, and now I had to decide what to do with the truth I had discovered. The night after my final confirmation of the affair, I cried for hours in our bathroom, muffling my sobs with towels so the kids wouldn't hear. The pain was physical, like someone had reached into my chest and was squeezing my heart until it might burst. I alternated between crushing sadness and blinding rage, imagining confronting them both, screaming at them, making them feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. By morning, my eyes were swollen and my throat raw. I called in sick to the library and took the kids to school wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day. When I got back home, I collapsed on our bed, and let the full weight of the situation crash over me. I had nightmares every time I managed to doze off. James leaving us, James taking the kids, James and Sophie laughing at me. I woke up gasping for air, my pillow wet with tears. I didn't remember crying. For 3 days, I was a zombie. I functioned just enough to take care of Emma and Noah, but they noticed something was wrong. "Are you sick, Mommy?" Emma asked, placing her small hand on my forehead the way I did when checking her for fever. "Just a little tired, sweetie," I replied, hugging her close and breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Is it because Daddy is always working?" Noah asked, his little face so serious it broke my heart all over again. "No, honey," I assured him. "Sometimes grown-ups just get tired. I'll be better soon." But how could I get better when every text alert on James's phone made me flinch? When every excuse for working late made me picture him with her? When every kiss goodbye felt like a mockery of our vows? I couldn't concentrate at work. Carol pulled me aside after I shelved returns in completely wrong sections for the 3rd time that week. "Helene, what's going on?" "This isn't like you." I nearly broke down then and there, but managed to blame it on a migraine. She sent me home early with concern in her eyes that made me feel even worse for lying. After a week of this emotional hell, I realized I needed a plan. Simply confronting James would give him the chance to lie, to manipulate me, to control the narrative. And a part of me wasn't ready for the inevitable fallout. A confrontation would bring the end of my marriage, the disruption to our children's lives, the painful process of divorce. But I also knew I couldn't continue living this lie. Every day that passed with me knowing and pretending not to know was destroying a piece of my soul. I needed the truth to be acknowledged not just by James, but by everyone involved. That's when I started following them. I'd drop the kids at my mother's house, claiming I was picking up extra shifts at the library, and instead would watch from a distance as James and Sophie met for lunch or drinks. I took pictures with my zoom lens, documented times and places. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, a spy in my own life. During one of these surveillance sessions, I saw them leave a restaurant together. James held the car door open for her, then leaned in for a kiss before she got in. It was such an intimate, normal gesture, as if they were the married couple, and I was the outsider. Something in me hardened in that moment. The last lingering hope that this was just a temporary insanity on James's part died as I watched him smile at her with the smile that used to be mine. While gathering evidence, I also researched Mark Walker. He wasn't difficult to find. His engineering firm's website had a detailed biography. He'd won awards for innovative bridge design, volunteered teaching STEM to underprivileged kids, and by all accounts seemed like a decent human being. His social media, though limited, showed a man who genuinely adored his wife. There were anniversary posts with heartfelt messages, photos of vacations where he gazed at Sophie like she hung the moon. He had no idea his world was about to shatter, just as mine had. I considered my options carefully. I could file for divorce immediately, citing infidelity. I could confront James privately and try to salvage our marriage through counseling. I could expose the affair to both families and our social circle. But none of those options seemed right. None of them addressed the fundamental injustice of the situation that James and Sophie were carrying on their affair with complete disregard for the lives they were destroying. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, not in private, where they could control the narrative, but in a setting where the truth would be undeniable. And so, I began to formulate a plan. A plan that would force James and Sophie to confront the reality of their betrayal. A plan that would give Mark the truth he deserved to know. A plan that would allow me to reclaim some power in a situation where I had felt utterly powerless. It was risky. It might backfire spectacularly. But as I sat in my car, watching my husband kiss another woman, I decided it was a risk I was willing to take. Because sometimes the best way to heal isn't to quietly accept your fate, but to rewrite the ending on your own terms. After 2 weeks of planning, I finally worked up the courage to contact Mark Walker. I found his email through his company website and sent him a brief message asking to meet about an urgent personal matter. I didn't mention James or Sophie, fearing he might confront her before I had a chance to explain everything in person. He responded within hours, understandably cautious, but willing to meet at a coffee shop near his office. I arrived early, rehearsing what I would say, how I would break the news that would devastate this stranger's life, just as mine had been devastated. Mark walked in precisely on time. He was taller than he appeared in photos, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He bought us both coffee before sitting across from me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "So, Mrs. Harrison," he began, using my married name, which now felt like a cruel joke. "What's this urgent matter you wanted to discuss?" I took a deep breath, my prepared speech suddenly evaporating. "Mr. Walker, I believe our spouses are having an affair." His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. For a long moment, he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he carefully set the cup down and cleared his throat. "That's a serious accusation," he said finally, his voice controlled but strained. "What makes you think that?" I opened my folder and laid out the evident screenshots of text messages, photos of them together, detailed accounts of their meetings that James had explained away as work commitments. With each piece of evidence, Mark's face grew paler, his knuckles whiter as he gripped the edge of the table. "Sophie has been working late a lot," he said quietly, almost to himself. "She's been distant, checking her phone constantly. I thought it was just stress from the new job." "James has been doing the same," I said, feeling a strange kinship with this man I'd just met. "I think they've been seeing each other for about 3 months." Mark picked up a photo of them kissing by James's car. His hand trembled slightly. "How did you find out?" I told him about discovering the text messages, about my week of heartbreak, about following them. It felt oddly cathartic to finally speak the truth aloud to someone who understood exactly how I felt. "What do you want to do?" he asked after I finished setting the photo down as if it burned his fingers. "I have a plan," I said, leaning forward, "but I need your help." I explained my idea. Mark listened intently, occasionally asking questions or suggesting modifications. By the time we finished our now cold coffee, we had agreed on a course of action. "It's unconventional," he admitted. "But so is finding out your wife considers someone else her soulmate." "Are you sure you're okay with doing this?" I asked. "It will be painful for everyone involved." "Sophie and I always valued honesty above everything," he said with bitter irony. "I think it's time we had some honesty in our marriages, don't you?" We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in touch as we prepared. As we left the coffee shop, Mark surprised me by giving me a quick, awkward hug. "Thank you," he said, "for having the courage to tell me. Most people wouldn't have." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We parted ways, two strangers united by betrayal, about to embark on one of the most difficult chapters of our lives. The next step was preparation. James's 37th birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. He had already told me he would be away on a business trip that weekend, a transparent excuse to spend his birthday with Sophie. This provided the perfect opportunity for our plan. I began organizing a surprise birthday party, sending invitations to friends, family, and colleagues, including several from Tech Future. I contacted James's boss, directly apologizing for the last-minute invitation, but explaining how I wanted to surprise my husband for his birthday. His boss was delighted and promised to help ensure James would be available, completely unaware of the real surprise that awaited. Mark, meanwhile, told Sophie he was planning a weekend away to reconnect, asking her to keep that weekend free. She reluctantly agreed, clearly planning to cancel at the last minute with some excuse. Mark acted completely normal, giving no indication he knew about the affair. Like me, he had become an actor in his own marriage. James became increasingly obvious with his lies, telling me about his upcoming sales conference in San Diego, with elaborate details about the hotel and schedule. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, hating every second of the charade, but knowing it was necessary for our plan to work. "I wish you didn't have to go on your birthday," I said, playing the part of the disappointed but understanding wife. "The kids and I will miss you." "I know, honey," he replied, barely looking up from his phone. "We'll celebrate when I get back. I promise." Each lie he told made me more certain that what Mark and I were planning was necessary. James had become so comfortable in his deception that he was barely trying to hide it anymore. He assumed I would continue to believe him, continue to wait at home, while he built a new life with Sophie. He had underestimated me, just as Sophie had underestimated Mark. That would be their downfall. 3 days before this party, I confirmed all the details with the venue, a private room at James's favorite restaurant. The guest list was finalized at 40 people, including James's parents, who were flying in specially for the occasion. I arranged for a colleague to decorate while I picked James up from the airport, another lie in our house of cards. Mark and I met once more to go over the final details of our plan. We sat in my car in a park halfway between our homes, speaking in low voices, even though there was no one around to hear us. "Sophie packed a weekend bag," Mark said, his voice tight. "Said it was for our trip. I checked it when she was showering. Lingerie I've never seen before." I reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, understanding his pain. "James bought new cologne," I replied. "He's never worn cologne regularly in our entire marriage until recently." We sat in silence for a moment, two betrayed spouses on the verge of changing all our lives forever. "Are we doing the right thing?" Mark asked suddenly. "Maybe there's a less public way to confront them." I had asked myself the same question countless times over the past weeks. Was this plan cruel? Was it just revenge? Would it hurt our chances in potential divorce proceedings? "They chose to lie to us in the most intimate way possible," I said finally. "They've been living double lives, making fools of us both. I think they forfeited their right to a private confrontation when they decided our marriages were disposable." Mark nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "Let's do this." We parted with a final review of the timing, both returning to our homes to prepare for the weekend that would change everything. The day of the party arrived with perfect late summer weather, not a cloud in the sky. It felt wrong somehow that nature should be so beautiful on a day that would contain so much pain. I spent the morning with Emma and Noah, taking them to the park, and for ice cream, treasuring these last moments of normalcy before the storm. My mother arrived in the afternoon to watch the kids for the evening. She sensed something was wrong despite my attempts to act normal. "Helene, are you sure everything's okay?" she asked as I applied makeup in the bathroom mirror, carefully covering the dark circles under my eyes from weeks of fitful sleep. "Just nervous about the surprise," I lied, adding more concealer than usual. "James will love it," she assured me. "You've planned everything perfectly." If only she knew what I had really planned. I dropped the kids off at my mother's house, hugging them a little longer than usual. Noah looked up at me with his serious eyes. "Are you still sad, Mommy?" he asked. "No, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Just excited about Daddy's party. I'll see you tomorrow, and you can hear all about it." I arrived at the restaurant an hour early to check the final arrangements. The private room was beautifully decorated with balloons and photos of James throughout the years. James as a boy, James in college, James and me at our wedding, James holding Emma as a newborn, James teaching Noah to ride a bike. The timeline of a life I thought we'd build together forever. Guests began arriving at 6:30. James's parents hugged me tightly, his mother commenting on how thin I looked and promising to fatten me up during their visit. Friends from college neighbors, colleagues from Tech Future, all gathered excited to surprise James. No one knew about the second surprise that awaited. Mark arrived at 6:45, looking handsome in a well-fitted suit. We had agreed he would come alone, explaining that Sophie was meeting him there due to a last-minute work commitment. No one questioned it. No one had any reason to suspect the elaborate deception unfolding. "Everything ready?" he asked quietly as we stood near the bar, both nursing drinks we barely touched. "Yes," I replied. "James's boss just texted. They're 10 minutes away." According to our plan, James's boss had told him about an emergency client dinner, insisting James join despite his travel plans. James had apparently panicked but couldn't refuse his boss. He'd presumably made some excuse to Sophie about being delayed. She meanwhile had told Mark she needed to work late but would meet him at 8 for their weekend getaway. At exactly 7 o'clock, a text came through. "Coming up now." "Places, everyone," I called out, and the room fell silent, guests hiding behind furniture or standing against the walls. I stood by the door, heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Mark positioned himself near the back of the room, out of immediate sight, but where he could clearly observe everything. The door opened, and James walked in, followed by his boss. The lights came on. "Surprise!" everyone shouted. James froze, his face a mask of shock and confusion. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "Happy birthday, honey," I said, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. "Surprise." "Helene, what? How?" he stammered, looking around at the smiling faces. "I thought you were planning a surprise party?" "Yes." I finished for him. "For months now." His boss clapped him on the shoulder. "Sorry for the deception about the client dinner, James. Your wife swore me to secrecy." James looked at me with panic in his eyes, clearly trying to process what this meant for his weekend plans with Sophie. I merely smiled, playing the role of devoted wife for a little longer. The party proceeded with drinks and appetizers. James moved through the room on autopilot, accepting birthday wishes and making small talk while frequently checking his phone. I imagined Sophie was bombarding him with texts, wondering where he was and why he wasn't on his way to meet her as planned. At 7:30, right on schedule, the restaurant manager approached me. "Mrs. Harrison, another guest has arrived asking for your party." I nodded. "Please show her in." Moments later, Sophie Walker stood in the doorway, confusion evident on her face as she scanned the room full of strangers. She spotted James across the room, and their eyes locked in mutual panic. I walked over to greet her, extending my hand, as if meeting her for the first time. "You must be Sophie," I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm so glad you could make it. James has told me so much about his new marketing director." Sophie shook my hand automatically, her eyes darting between me and James, who was now making his way toward us with a sickly smile. "Thank you for inviting me," she managed. "I didn't realize it was a birthday party." "Oh, it's not just a birthday party," I said pleasantly. "It's also a game night. We love games in our family, don't we, James?" James reached us, his face ashen. "Helene, I didn't realize you'd invited Sophie." "Of course I did. You've mentioned what an important addition she's been to the team." I linked my arm through Sophie's. "Come, let's get you a drink. Your husband should be here any minute." Sophie nearly tripped over her own feet at the mention of Mark. "My husband—" "Yes, I invited Mark too. I hope that's okay. I got his contact information from the company directory." I guided her toward the bar where Mark was now standing, watching us approach. The look on Sophie's face when she saw Mark was one I'll never forget. Pure, unadulterated terror mixed with disbelief. Mark raised his glass in greeting, his expression carefully neutral. "Hello, darling," he said. "Surprise." James had followed us and now stood frozen beside Sophie. The four of us formed a small island in the sea of the party tension crackling between us like electricity. "What's going on?" Sophie whispered, looking between Mark and me. "I think it's time for our game," I announced, raising my voice slightly. "Everyone gather around. We're going to play a little truth or dare." Guests moved closer, intrigued by the suggestion. James's parents, his college buddies, our neighbors, his colleagues, all formed a circle, unaware they were about to witness the implosion of two marriages. "James, since you're the birthday boy, you go first," I said, keeping my voice light and playful. "Truth or dare?" James swallowed hard, clearly trying to figure out how much I knew. "Truth," he said finally, perhaps thinking it was the safer option. I smiled, the expression never reaching my eyes. Who is the most important person in your life? A simple question on the surface. One with an obvious answer at his birthday party, surrounded by family and friends. His wife. His children. But James knew this was no innocent question. "You are," he said after a pause that lasted a beat too long. "You and the kids." Murmurs of awe rippled through the crowd. Only the four of us knew what was really happening. "That's sweet," I said. "But I think we should be honest tonight, don't you? I know you found your soulmate, James, and Sophie has found hers too." The room went still. James and Sophie both paled visibly. "What are you talking about?" James attempted forcing a laugh that sounded more like a gasp. That's when I played my final card. I turned to Sophie. "Sophie, did you know your soulmate is married with 2 children? Did you know he's been lying to his wife about business trips so he could meet you in hotel rooms? Did you think about Emma and Noah when you were texting their father at 2 in the morning?" Sophie's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. James stepped forward, anger replacing shock on his face. "Helene, this isn't the place for this." "No, where is the place, James? In our bed, where I've been lying awake for weeks, wondering what I did wrong. Or maybe in the hotel where you were planning to spend your birthday weekend, the one you told me was a sales conference in San Diego." Gasps and whispers spread through the room. James's mother put her hand over her mouth. His boss stared in shock. "And Sophie," Mark spoke up, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't notice the new lingerie packed for our supposed romantic weekend, the weekend you were planning to cancel on at the last minute with another Work emergency? Mark, I can explain. Sophie began, tears forming in her eyes. I'm sure you both can explain, I said, addressing the room as much as them. I'm sure you have plenty of explanations for the lies, the secret meetings, the text messages about finding your soulmates in each other, while your actual spouses waited at home. James's face drained of all color. How did you... I saw the messages, James. All of them. So has Mark. We know everything. The silence in the room was deafening. Then James's father stepped forward. Son, what the hell is going on here? James looked from his father to me to Sophie, who was now openly crying, to Mark, who stood tall and unflinching. I'm sorry, he whispered, and I wasn't sure who he was apologizing to. Maybe all of us. Maybe himself. So are we, I said, speaking for both Mark and myself. So are we. The party broke up shortly after that. Guests awkwardly made excuses to leave, avoiding eye contact with any of us. James's parents stayed, his mother crying quietly, while his father demanded explanations. Sophie fled the restaurant, Mark following after giving me a brief nod. Our plan had worked. The truth was out. There was no more hiding, no more lies. And as I drove home alone that night, I felt something unexpected amid the pain and anger relief. The worst had happened. The truth was exposed. And somehow I was still standing. Somehow I knew I would be okay. The first month after the party was a blur of pain, legal consultations, and difficult conversations. James moved out that same night, staying at a hotel and then finding a small apartment near his office. Sophie, I later learned, had also moved out of the home she shared with Mark, though she and James weren't living together. Apparently, finding your soulmate doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to face reality together when everything falls apart. Telling Emma and Noah that their father wouldn't be living with us anymore was the hardest conversation of my life. Emma, at 6, understood more than I wished she did. Did Daddy stop loving us? She asked, her little face crumpled in confusion. No, sweetie, I assured her, holding both children close. Daddy will always love you. He just made some grown-up mistakes, and now things need to be different. Noah was less verbal about his feelings, but I noticed he started having nightmares and became clingy, afraid I would disappear too. We all started seeing a family therapist who helped us navigate this new reality with age-appropriate explanations and coping strategies. James was awkward during his visits with the kids, clearly ashamed to face me and unsure how to explain his absence to them. But I insisted on maintaining a civil relationship for Emma and Noah's sake. They had lost enough stability without adding parental warfare to the mix. Mark and I stayed in touch, an unexpected friendship born from shared trauma. We would meet occasionally for coffee, updating each other on divorce proceedings and emotional progress. His marriage had been shorter than mine, and without children, making the legal aspects simpler, but the emotional toll was just as heavy. Sophie keeps saying it wasn't what it looked like, he told me during one of our coffee meetings. Says it was just an emotional connection that got out of hand. James said the same thing, I replied. Funny how similar their excuses are. Have they contacted you for the texts? Mark asked. My lawyer says Sophie's lawyer has been asking for copies of everything I have. I nodded. Same here. They're trying to claim invasion of privacy or something. My lawyer says they don't have much ground to stand on given the circumstances. The divorce process was painful and expensive. James initially tried to argue for joint custody, but his absence from the children's lives made that difficult to justify. Eventually, we settled on me having primary custody, with James having visitation every other weekend and one dinner each week. He didn't fight over the house, allowing me and the kids to stay in the home they knew, though financially it was a stretch for me to maintain. I joined a support group for divorced parents, finding solace in the stories of others who had walked this path before me. Some had been divorced for years and had found new happiness. Others were freshly wounded like me. All understood the complex grief of losing not just a partner, but a future you had planned, a family unit you had cherished. The support group recommended a book on rebuilding after betrayal. The author suggested focusing on one small accomplishment each day, something that reminded you of your own strength and capability, separate from the relationship that had ended. I started small, rearranging furniture, without asking anyone's opinion, fixing the leaky faucet. James had always said he'd get to taking the kids on a weekend camping trip by myself. Each small victory built my confidence. I started thinking about my own future, not just surviving, but building something new. The part-time library job wasn't enough to support us long-term, especially with the reduced child support James could pay while establishing his new household. I had always enjoyed crafting, making handmade journals and photo albums as gifts for friends. During one particularly sleepless night, I created an online store and listed a few of my creations. To my surprise, they sold quickly. I made more experimenting with different designs and materials. Within 6 months, what had started as a distraction became a legitimate side business. As my online presence grew, I started blogging about my crafts, subtly weaving in themes of rebuilding and finding beauty in broken places. I never explicitly mentioned my divorce, but the authenticity of my journey resonated with readers. My following grew, and so did my sales. By the 1-year mark after the party, I had enough consistent income to increase my hours at the library, knowing I had a second revenue stream to support us. Mark's journey took a different path. He threw himself into his work, winning a major contract for an innovative bridge design that garnered attention in his field. We celebrated with dinner at a casual restaurant, comfortable now in our friendship, without the intensity of fresh betrayal binding us. "I'm moving back to Chicago," he told me over dessert. "There's a firm there that's been trying to recruit me for years. I think it's time for a fresh start." "I'll miss our coffee talks," I said, genuinely sad to lose this unexpected ally. "We'll stay in touch," he promised. "And Helene, thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth when you found out, for helping me face it instead of continuing to live a lie." I smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. "Thank you for standing beside me that night. I couldn't have done it alone." As for James and Sophie, their soulmate connection didn't survive the aftermath of our confrontation. According to mutual friends, they tried dating officially after both divorces were finalized, but the relationship quickly deteriorated. The fantasy of forbidden love couldn't withstand the harsh reality of being built on deception and pain. James eventually transferred to another division to avoid working with Sophie, who herself left the company a few months later. 2 years after the night that changed everything, I ran into James at Emma's school performance. He looked older, tired around the eyes. We made awkward small talk about the kids and the weather before he suddenly blurted out, "I made the biggest mistake of my life, Helene. I threw away everything that mattered for something that wasn't even real." "We can't go back, James, but we can go forward trying to be better people, better parents." He nodded, his eyes wet. "You seem good, happy even." "I am," I realized, somewhat surprised. "Not all the time, but more often than not now." And it was true. The woman who had sobbed in her bathroom 2 years ago, who had felt utterly destroyed by betrayal, had been rebuilt into someone stronger, wiser, and ultimately more at peace. Not because the pain hadn't been real, but because I had survived it. Because I had refused to let someone else's choices define my worth or determine my future. I look at my life now, and while it's not what I had planned, it's mine. Authentic and hard-won. My business continues to grow. The kids are thriving, resilient in ways that sometimes amaze me. I've even started dating occasionally, approaching relationships with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. Sometimes people ask if I regret the public confrontation, if I wish I had handled things more privately. I tell them that while the method may have been dramatic, the truth needed to come out, and I needed to reclaim my power in a situation where I had been made to feel powerless. I needed James and Sophie to face the reality of the pain they had caused, not just to Mark and me, but to innocent children who didn't understand why their family was breaking apart. The greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. James didn't leave because I wasn't enough. He left because he wasn't enough, not honest enough, not committed enough, not mature enough to understand that real love isn't about soul-stirring passion that burns bright and fast. It's about showing up day after day. It's about choosing your partner again and again, even when it's difficult, even when someone new seems exciting and uncomplicated. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you to what you truly deserve. The greatest love affair you'll ever have is the one with your own worth, and that's a soulmate no one can take away. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and growth. Remember, your worth is not defined by someone else's choices, but by your own courage to keep moving forward. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to write the next chapter of yours, whatever challenges you may be facing.